Well, we've been stuck in for a whole bunch of different reasons.
Well, us and everybody else.
Yeah, 2020, the year we were all stuck in. But we want to get you guys caught up on our projects that we've been working on while we're stuck in.
I got this little guy for my birthday a couple of years ago, but he needed assembly. But I was a little intimidated to try that. But when you're locked in, what better time to play?
Well, I know a lot of what you've been doing are these building interiors.
Well, I've got so many leftover scraps from other projects, and why throw them in the garbage?
Yeah, so you built this, what, entirely out of parts?
Yes, it's out of parts, leftover parts, except for the books. I got on the computer and printed off book parts and made my own little books.
And they look really neat.
Well, they're real books. They have pages and everything. I mean, that's boredom.
Well, and you know what? We're getting close to building the new Rex Hotel.
Right.
In mostly half-inch scale, 20th scale, but I think the upper floors will be done in half-inch. So I want you to build a bunch of room interiors because it's a huge hotel, 4 feet tall, and it's going to need a whole bunch of hotel rooms in it.
More books.
And then I've been working mostly on the railroad.
Right.
I've been working on the railroad. But it's got the two components. It's got the indoor section, and here in the switching yard for the last couple of weeks, I've been working on the road crossing, the grade crossing.
I love that crossing.
And it's turned out really, really nice. So that's going to be an upcoming show, probably next week's show, as a matter of fact, on how I made the grade crossing. And the current project is the locomotive shop, which has a lot needed still. And then, of course, there's the outdoor section.
Yes, who's this guy? He's our second child, I think.
Yeah, boy, we've been hiring him whenever we need a carpenter. And we already did a show on the benchwork for the outdoor section. We put that in last spring. And mostly I wanted to let it rest through the summer because I was concerned about what 105-degree heat was going to do to all of this. And I'm glad I did because having had a garden railroad in the past, I've come to the understanding that the number one enemy of your garden railroad is the hot sun.
It is.
You would think it's water, but it's the hot sun. So here's the section that we built. It's the west fence along here, the Grapevine.
Yes.
And we put that together, and as soon as we got it put together, I realized there were some things about it I didn't like. And then as soon as the sun started beating down on it, a lot of problems materialized. But the first thing that cropped up was, as I just sort of laid track on top of here, I just let it rest on there. My original plan was to have the track just free floating on the top, because that's how I'd done my ground level railroad 20 years ago. Well, up on a bench like this, it just wanders all over the place, and that isn't good.
No.
Moreover, I wanted the whole thing to be wider.
Yes.
I'd build it at 16 inches wide, thinking that would be plenty adequate, and there has to be a dual track up there, and by the time we do that, there's nothing left over for buildings or anything else.
No.
So I thought, darn it, I should have made it 24 inches wide. So immediately I thought, project one here before we lay any track is going to be to widen this out to 24 inches. But I also want to see what the sun does to it.
Well, and in case of a derailment, we don't want to run like a football player either.
No, I don't want to see anything falling on the ground. Well, the sun did take a toll.
It did.
And so 2 months later, when the temperature hit 103, the wood started to warp. And that was a major problem. These vertical posts twisted. 2 of them twisted. Look how far off axis that thing has twisted. And so that had to be dealt with. But the larger issue was the decking itself also started moving around. And gaps opened up and boards moved vertically relative to each other because there wasn't enough support underneath to prevent the decking wood from moving. And then, moreover, the track, as I said, it was free to sort of wander around on there. And the track was wandering around to the point where it was crawling completely off the edge of the layout. As you can see in this picture, I'm using rail clamps at the rail joints. And that's what I'd done with my ground level railroad. And then I had the track free to move around, which it needs to be if you're using these rail joints. And what I'm seeing now is I've got to anchor this track down. And if I'm going to anchor it down, I can't clamp the joints. That'll cause everything to just break and come loose. So complete rethink on that.
Yes, a railroad track, not a roller coaster.
Exactly. So it's time to almost start completely over. First, pull all of this bent wood into position. The 2 posts that twisted, I'm just going to cut them off at the top of the lattice work. Fortunately, it was the 2nd post and the 5th post or so. Anyway, it's every other post. So I can just cut those 2 down, and the lantern spacing, once the overhead lights are put in, will still be correct. It'll still be evenly spaced. But those 2 posts will just be short. Anyway, as I said, I left this decking on there, and then I put some vertically oriented bracing underneath it to try to keep it from warping. Probably should have taken it out and started over, but that was what I did, and then I widened it. And so here's what I came up with to try to solve all of these problems. Started by pulling whatever warpage I could out of the underlying wood. Probably should have just taken it completely off and started over. But at any rate, reinforced it with some vertical elements and then tried to pull the warping out of that, and then layered over that with OSB, oriented strand board, that you can get at Home Depot. They use this for flooring and roofing on houses. And it's got tongue and groove joints that will keep the joints from pulling apart and separating like the pressure treated wood has. Now this stuff isn't the slightest bit weather resistant or weatherproof, and so if you're using it for roofing, well, you have to put a roof on top of it, roofing material. So that's exactly what I've done here. I got some of this rolled roofing material, roof felt as they call it. But they use this on garages and all kinds of things, and you just roll it out, and then they seal the seams with like a tar material. I picked a color that looks sort of earth tony because I figured it's going to show through in a lot of places, and I don't want to put something on there that doesn't look good. So anyway, here's what that looks like once the material is all rolled out on there. And then, of course, it's going to be cut down to size. Now, in some places, there's a patchwork of seams because of the way it has to cut in and around, in this case, the power pole and the wide section and so on. Mostly just nailed those seams down with roofing nails, which is what holds the whole thing in place. And then, where necessary, seal that in with caulk, because I don't want to use that icky, tarry roof material. It's disgusting.
Well, that's starting to look really good now.
Yeah, I think I like the color, I like the look, I like the fact that it's flat.
Right.
Flat and for the most part level. It still has a little bit of irregularity because the wood underneath still has a little bit of irregularity. And the 2 short posts now have electrical connections on the back of them, so I can plug in tools and stuff.
Good idea.
The only problem is all the cabling goes over to the electrical box, and it needs to be tied into the electrical box, and we need an electrician to do that. And you know, it's really hard to get an electrician these days.
It is. It's really, really hard. Shocking.
Shocking. So we're still waiting. There's still no power out here, but the electrician I've talked to said, well, maybe somewhere toward the end of November I'll have time to fit. So anyway, we're still waiting to have power on out here. But I like the idea that this is also keeping the sun off the wood.
Right, and the light color should help.
Now, because it's going to be double track out here, the double track is going to have crossovers, and that means I need to resurrect some of my switches.
Aye.
These are LGB switches left over from my garden railroad, and normally I don't think I'd have used them over again. It's just that I have about 20 of these guys, and so might as well use them, but they need to be rebuilt.
Yes, and cleaned.
They're a mess. They're in the exact same condition they were in 20 years ago when I took up the outdoor railroad. But these LGB switches are pretty much indestructible. They just need some restoration work. So cleaning up, moving I dismounted the points on there, and then mostly I had to redo the switch machines.
Oh my goodness.
Now about most of the switches that I had out there had electrical motors, and those are just fraught with problems, and I don't know that too many of those are salvageable. But where I'm at shoulder height now, much taller, I'd rather just have these manual switch machines. So I took the ones I had and got the bugs and spiders out of those and got those working freely. And that's what I'm planning to use on the whole railroad now. Now, the other thing that I have to use is this stuff, Noalox.
Yes.
The grease from hell. It just, you touch it, it gets all over everything if you're not careful. But where aluminum is in contact with brass, or where aluminum is in contact with anything,
right?
The first time I put down these switches in the outdoor railroad, when I took one up for maintenance, I found that a 1/4 inch of the aluminum rail had eroded away to nothing.
A little white powder there.
So you have to coat all of the aluminum with this stuff. You can't have brass in contact with aluminum, and for that matter, I now lubricate all of the joints because I don't want any of them seizing up and refusing to move. Where the track is going to be firmly mounted, the joints have to be free to move. Moreover, any place that brass is in contact with aluminum, you have to coat that with the Noalox, no aluminum oxide, Noalox. Now, because I'm mounting the track permanently to the wood, as the rail expands and contracts in the hot sun, there has to be a gap here at the joints, and that's why I can't clamp them anymore.
Oh, that makes sense.
So depending on the temperature, it's about 84 degrees out right now while I'm working. So I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch gap here. As it cools off, the gap opens up. As it heats up, the gap closes. But if the gap were to close all the way, then something might pop loose because something's got to give somewhere.
Or you have a nice buckle.
Yeah, you'll have a sun kink.
Yes.
As they have on the real railroads. So I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch gap relative to about a 60-degree temperature as I'm laying the track, and then hoping that that will work out. Here's where the crossovers cross between one track and the other, and you'll notice I'm using those bright yellow insulators, because one is the eastbound track and the other is the westbound track. If they were touching right there, they'd be a dead short. Ooh. And so later on when I'm doing the wiring, I have to wire this with something called a reverse loop. That'll be an upcoming show. But in the meantime, I have to be careful that the left track never touches the right track, because one is eastbound main, the other is westbound main, and they're at opposite polarities. So as I'm laying the track, I also want to put a fascia board on here.
Good idea. It looks more finished.
It looks better. I'm using white cedar. I started using red cedar and it got crumbly, so I just took it off and threw it away. But these are just white cedar fencing slats, should be bug resistant, and they serve a couple of purposes. A, it looks nice, but this lip, I'm leaving a 3/4 inch lip. If there's a derailment, hopefully that'll keep the train from leaping to its death.
Boy, I hope so.
And then also I'm going to have loose ballast up here and that kind of thing. It should keep that from falling off onto the lawn too. Now over here at the south end, which is actually the west loop, everything is using railroad directions. Everything is east or west, but this is actually south. I know it's confusing. But there'll be a loop down here to take the trains around the loop and up the other track on the main. And so the tracks actually have to cross right off into nothing for the time being, where they will eventually go through a big loop down here. But that means the fascia board had to be cut down so that the tracks were free to go right off the edge of the layout. And, you know, I think I need to put a bumper here temporarily.
I think so.
It looks like train suicide right there.
Yeah,
so.
Talk about southbound.
And but it's looking good.
Yeah, I
there
think
it is, all mounted and bolted down. And now if the rail joints work out, and if everything works out come next summer when the hot sun comes back out, should be fine. Well, time to rig the wiring.
Oh boy.
I'm going to use the exact same technique that I've used inside, which is the technique I've used forever and ever, and that's every single rail gets its own feed to a bus line. That way I'm not counting on the rail joints to carry power at all.
That's a good idea.
That's a good idea. It's never failed on me. I know it seems like overkill, but that's what I've always done. Now, it's always difficult to hook wires to the aluminum rail, and in the past I'd used these clamps that clamp the rail joints together and just hook the wires to these. These are stainless steel. So I'm going to use those again, but instead of using them to clamp the joints, I'm going to place these at mid-rail, right in the middle, and just use them as an electrical connection.
Oh.
So that's what they look like right there at mid-rail. So as I was laying the track right at the center of each rail, I placed a pair of these, and again coated with Noah locks, because it's aluminum and up against stainless steel, who knows how it's going to behave. And then I can take one of the Allen screws here and tie that to the wire. I'm using a 22 gauge drop to the bus, and then everything outside is going to be crimped, inside soldered, outside crimped. So I've crimped a spade lug onto the end of the wire there, a little loop lug, and then I can put that underneath the Allen screw and tie everything down that way.
Looks like a good connection.
Now here at the switches, you can see I've actually clamped the joint, but I haven't clamped it in a way that it won't move. They're only tight on the switch side. The screws that are on the rail side are loose so that the rail can still move in and out along the gap. Now below, that creates a sea of drops.
It sure does.
In red and black. Red always indicates the outside of the loop. Black indicates the inside of the loop. And where we've got two directions here on the main, it's really important so I don't short the whole thing out. But outside red, inside black. The whole railroad is wired that way, and then that way when I tie all the bus lines together, in theory, nothing's going to short out and create a fire.
Well, let's hope not. I'd hate to have you as a Christmas tree this year.
But as you can see, there's a bunch of these drops, and then I've crimped a spade lug onto the end of every one of these drops, and then those will be used to tie that to the 12 gauge bus line. But they just crimp on there, should be water resistant, should be okay outside. Plus they're up underneath the roofing material and everything, so they should be out of the weather.
Well, that looks really good.
So then another little clip-on thing goes around the 12 gauge bus, and it just pinches onto that and makes connection. And then the spade lug that's crimped onto the drop holds the whole thing together.
Wow.
And it should be pretty weather resistant. As I say, it all encloses in plastic. It should keep the weather off of the connections, and hopefully this will work great for outside. Now up on the top side, that leaves all these little red lugs alongside the rail. And I don't care for the look, but I do like the plastic wrapping around the connection. So I'm just going to come back with a little paint and paint out the red color.
That's a good idea too.
I'm not too keen on the red color,
No.
but for now they'll just be red, and that helps me see where my electrical connections are while I'm working on everything else. They're pretty obvious at this
They are.
point. Now we saw these wall hangings at an open house in St. George, Utah.
Right, somebody had used those.
And they are Burwood wall hangings by Homeco. They were popular in the 1970s, and
Right.
you just hang those on your wall, and they look neat. But they make great building fronts, and you can find them on eBay.
Yes.
Some of them are a little hard to find, but boy, they make nice building backdrops in this scale. So after a whole bunch of searching on eBay, we found 3 of these.
Right.
And they typically sell for around $100, so they're not cheap because they're very sought after mid-century antiques at this point. But don't they look nice?
I love them.
They look great out there. Now the Grapevine has also been cooperating and growing nicely up onto the lattice work, and that's filling in behind the Burwood wall hangings here.
It looks neat.
It looks really neat. There's some thin areas, so I'm sticking some fake leaves in there temporarily. Anyway, wiring is all hooked up. Building fronts are in place. I think it's about time to test the whole thing. Let's put power to it.
Here we go.
Here we go. Let's run some trains. Now, as I mentioned, the power's not on out here yet.
No.
We're still waiting for the electrician. And so, well, there's a bunch of extension cord laid on the lawn out here. It was the only way to get power out here to run all this. So temporarily, it's all sort of just set up with extension cords. once the bus line runs inside the building, because the outside track will tie to the inside track at some point, and the bus line will go all the way around, and power will come from in there to out here, and everything will run from our phones and with an application, so we won't have to worry about electrical cords draped all over the ground. But for now, it's electrical cords.
Right.
And I do need to get those bumpers on the end of the track so these trains don't just drive right off the end and kill themselves.
Whoop. Yep.
Near miss. Almost lost a train. Well, as happens, the seasons changed.
They sure did, rather quickly.
And suddenly we had our first snowstorm. And it's nice to see that the benchwork holds that up. I did some more reinforcing of the benchwork here because I thought snow load might be a problem, and I got that in just in time. But it's so tempting to run in the snow out here.
It could be fun.
Yeah. Now, back when I had the ground level, getting down on hands and knees and running in the snow, oh my gosh.
That's not an option.
No, I did it twice and swore I'd never do it again. But now that this is up at shoulder height, I'm digging out the snow equipment.
There we go.
Now, I don't feel like running the extension cords through the snow, so I'm just going to set some stuff out here and see how it looks. But there's the Model T Snowcat. This is how they used to deliver the mail back in the day. Aren't those neat?
They are. It just reminds me about Christmas, Frosty the Snowman.
Oh, I tell you what, isn't that just looks so neat? I packed the snow down on the road and cleared it off the tracks. Dug out the rotary snowplow.
There you go.
This is a USA Trains rotary snowplow with a Delton tender. And it's a project I'd put together clear back when I had the ground level railroad. Never ran it. There's never been power to this. You can see I don't even have the hand grabs on here or anything yet.
There's no rust or anything.
There's nothing. It needs some work. But now I want to get on this, and I want to use it out here because now that we don't have to get down on hands and knees and crawl around, I want to use this guy out here. This will be fun.
This will be fun.
We just need electricity out here so I don't have to run extension cords through the wet snow. But I also thought, this will make some great Christmas cards.
It will.
Now, we don't do a lot of Christmas cards, but boy, I thought this is the perfect Christmas card.
It really looks fun.
So I just staged some Christmas cards out here. Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop over to the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, the way to do that is with the infamous blue button. Are we ready for the blue button? Here it comes. Zoink! Blue button right there. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here on Tuesday because we're looking at some bicycles from the attic. Check
boy. I'll see ya.
Bye-bye.